Welcome to this special edition of Daytime Ottawa here on Rogers TV. Our focus today is on Truth and Reconciliation Day, and we promise to share some powerful stories. And we start off our first guest. So pleased to have him on the show to share his powerful story. I'm joined by Tim Olone. Tim, welcome. Wonderful to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor.
Tim, you describe yourself as coming from two wounded communities. I wonder if you could explain to our viewers about those communities and what you mean by that.
Yeah, no problem. So I served 10 years in the military, and, I left what I didn't realize, spiritually and physically wounded as well. So identify that, but also coming from the Indigenous community. My mother was a survivor of residential schools. My whole family had been impacted. So I identify as coming from two wounded communities. And, on one side, there's an immense amount of support, which I'm very grateful. And the other side, not so much. So I'm hoping that we can, work to improve that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of that, because I know you've experienced, massive racism and trauma in your life. Explain to us what you've gone through.
Well, I am a product of what they call the 60s scoop era. My mom was far too young to raise me, so she had me at a very young age of 15 or 16, and I was either given up or taken from the 60s scoop era, and I was raised in an Aboriginal family. The result of that was, a lot of shame being Indigenous, a bit of physical and spiritual, impacts upon me, but also my time in the military wasn't a difficult time. It was a very difficult time, I should say, in which there was a lot of racism. There is a class action suit making its way through the court system now to address that thing. And, just me as, I guess, a vulnerable young man, a vulnerable child, it just really, had impacted me. And I'm very fortunate to have had the supports thanks to Veterans Affairs. That allowed me an opportunity to come out of the valley of darkness, being mental health decline.
Right.
And so it's been part of my journey to do everything that I can to get myself healthy and be present for my children and my family.
And part of that journey is that you've made this commitment to really engage and educate, and you're doing that through your initiative. Let's talk about that initiative.
Yeah, no problem. You know what? I moved down from Yellowknife to Ottawa so I could do a master's degree. And I always promised myself, my children were 3 and 1.5, that whatever school they went to here in Ottawa, that I was committed to making sure they saw themselves as Indigenous children in whatever school they were. So, it all started when my son was in kindergarten in a humble way of just going in and giving space to sing to all the children a Dene honor song. And that was the first step that allowed us to proceed and become more active, not only with the school, but the school board. And then, of course, after that, we brought on an elder. Albert Dumont has been very kind with his time with us. We grew. We're now we have a very active board that assists us. And because of the nature of Ottawa allowed us to continue a bigger space. And, we're just very humbled to that space has grown and blossomed to what it is culminating in this Friday's event, reconciliation event.
Yeah, and my understanding is that you have 3 days of programming. Describe what each day will be like, Tim.
Yeah, no problem. The first day is for students, youth. Our focus has always been on youth, but so we're setting a special day to allow high school students to come for the day. So the programming is really around then. The second day is for the public. It's going to be a little bit quieter than the third day, but we're allowing a space for survivors to continue to share their truth, allowing members of the public to come in and witness. So we have a sacred space for survivors of residential school. And then, of course, it culminates on the third day, which is going to start early on Parliament Hill. It's going to be a spirit walk from Parliament Hill down after a bit of speaking folks to share with us on Parliament Hill. Spirit walk down to LeBreton Flats to culminate in a national televised event from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And then we'll have a couple more hours of programming afterwards. But we're really proud. This is the first time Màmawi together gets the national stage, per se. We're sharing, the stage with APTN, on APTN, but sharing the stage with the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, the NCTR. We're really excited about the possibility of what's going to happen this week.
Yeah, congratulations on that. I know you've put a lot of hard work into that. And speaking of hard work, you were also an advisor to the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Tell me how that role came about, Tim.
Well, you know what? The TRC in its early stages was really struggling with the government of the day. I was brought in initially as the intergovernmental person. I have an intergovernmental background in negotiations. And Justice Sinclair, asked me if I'd would like to be his advisor after, I guess, kind of watching how I operated for a couple months. I said, absolutely, I'm all in. We were struggling with the government of the day, but, as his advisor, I just tried to keep up. Was humbled and honored to be part of the historic process, humbled to be honored to be his advisor and to work with the, not only him, but with the commissioners as well as we move forward. And kind of what I do now is because I guess as a result of that, I became a subject matter expert on reconciliation. So not only have we work on reconciliation through Màmawi together, but I give lectures and presentations right across country. I'm very humbled to share that. And actually just a half hour, I was meeting with our good friends at the United Way. They wanted to know a bit more. And so that's what I do now, just try and do what I can to participate and push forward on reconciliation.
Tim, when it comes to reconciliation, what more do you feel needs to be done?
Well, let's be clear. The calls to action were only laid out 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's going to be decades before, we get to see the fruits of the seeds that we're planting now. I call them seeds of dignity. And just like, Mr. Sinclair said, this is going to be an uphill battle. It's not a observer sport. It's full contact, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But, using the analogy of there's a mountain, here's a map, it's going to go beyond your lifetime and certainly mine. But the seeds of the dignity that we're planting now will be decades from now and showing the fruits of, our labor. But it is a Canadian issue, not just for Indigenous peoples or survivors. It's going to be work, and we ask people to join our circle and helping us move forward on reconciliation.
Yeah, and I know, I'm just running out of time here, and I know that, part of the messaging here too, Tim, is that we need as Canadians to become better allies to Indigenous people and just listen, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest things that have been asked for so long, and I really appreciate your time, Tim. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks so much. Merci, Joe.
Merci, Joe. Don't go away. Lots more coming up here on Daytime Ottawa. Welcome back to Daytime Ottawa. As you heard from Tim, he touched on it just a little bit, but we want to go into more in depth when it comes to the 60s Scoop. And I am joined by the co-founder of the 60s Scoop Network, Elaine Kicknosway. Welcome to the show, Elaine. Great to have you here. Elaine, before, as I said, we'll go more in depth on that, but I'd just like to start off talking a little bit about yourself and your own story and your own journey.
Well, I'm known as a 60 scoop survivor, and I was brought to Ottawa when I was 14. I was apprehended when I was about 2.5, adopted out when I was about 3.5, nearly 4, and raised by a non-Indigenous, within a non-Indigenous home, and call Ottawa like my home too. But back then, we weren't talking about territories or nations or clan or kinship or ownership, like who has always been here. So that was a new conversation as I grew up, you know.
Yeah, well, what was that experience like, being a part of a non-Indigenous family with, you know, obviously I imagine you lost your culture and language. What was that like for you?
A lot of times it was a lot of questions, like why was I the only evident First Nations person in the room? Where did I belong? I was raised in a loving home, like within that non-Indigenous home. They were open, they were kind, they were encouraging, but they also weren't told that place of systematic genocide, the continuum from residential school to relocation to day schools to residential school to 60 scoop, right? Or to the millennium scoop of what we call it today. And the forced relocation, the forced place of loss of language, loss of culture, loss of family, kin. And being raised in Saskatchewan early, in my early days, I would see a lot more First Nations, Cree people, or the Friendship Center. The Friendship Center, I really believe in the movement of the Friendship Center and how the Friendship Center still supports families today.
Yeah, and you said it was much different when we were speaking off camera. You said it was much different, the residential schools compared to the 60s scoop. Maybe you could just explain to our viewers what was different.
Yeah, because in residential school, kids of different nations saw each other, different ageisms, right, or siblings, but there was such disconnect then, like don't talk to them. Day school, they saw each other. In the 60s scoop, we were forced to not see each other.
Well, like very isolated.
Yeah, very isolated, to make us very independent today. Like that's a trauma response of not being raised around kin, community, language, song, ceremony, rite of passage. So there's always this place of, is this normal? Do I fit? Do I fit in? You know, those different conversations internally.
Let's talk about the network. Co-founded this back in 2014.
Yeah.
Tell me about the 60 Scoop Network and what you do to help support people.
Well, it's survivor-led, survivor-driven, and we started around a coffee table asking each other, like, how many more? Like, it can't just be us that are sitting around this table. How many more? And so that led to our first gathering, and we had it in Vanier. And we just opened the door and said, if you're a 60 Scoop survivor or child welfare survivor or group home child welfare survivor that's Indigenous, Inuit, or Métis, come on down.
Just to talk.
Just to talk and do workshops and do talking circles and do a little bit of feasting and round dancing. And we had a fire. And it was interesting because everybody started coming from across Canada, from the United States.
Really?
We heard from people in France and in different countries that said, I would love to attend, but I can't.
Right.
Will you do it again? And we thought, like, oh, we'll just do it once.
Oh,
once
really?
is good enough.
So that it was just that one event.
Yeah.
And then it's obviously grown from there because of
and then we had it the next year, and then the next year, and then pandemic hit, and then we're having another one this year at the end of October.
Yeah, and I guess part of the vision for this too was to educate, right?
Yes.
We talked to Tim about that, engaging and educating.
Yeah.
Are you talking about education even beyond, you know, Indigenous peoples, educating, you know, people like myself?
Yes.
Is that part of the mandate?
It's a really needed conversation about what does the truth of the state of Canada look like, of how it's treated the original people of the land. And if we're all treaty people, because you're a treaty person, I'm a treaty person.
Right.
I just happen to carry a number, but you have a responsibility of respecting the land, respecting the cultures, respecting the languages, knowing the protocol, knowing our history. And it should have started for you, just like everybody else, in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, all the way up. Because nowadays people are only finding out about it in college or university, and then or through a program called the Blanket Exercise, or through the movement of the 60 Scoop Network, or the TRC, or the RCAP report, or the Calls to Justice.
Are you encouraged at all that the conversation's been opened and that people are listening?
I think people need to take their ownership.
Okay.
Right? Like you keep on hearing of our relatives that went to the schools, but take the ownership on your side. Did your family members work at a residential school?
Right.
Right? That's taking that ownership, and it's uncomfortable conversations.
Right, and we should be comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations. You and I were talking about that in the green room a little earlier. Elaine, I wish I had more time with you. Great conversation. Thanks so much for joining.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. We'll be back with more Daytime Ottawa here on Rogers TV right after this. Welcome back to the show, back to continue sharing these powerful stories we promised you. And joining me right now, I'm joined by Rhonda Doxtator. She is the cultural coordinator at the First Peoples Innovation Center. Welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. As I always start off with each guest, just love to give you some space to tell me about your journey and your background.
Well, Kawisaha ni yongyots, onyada akne I, hatnawal ni wagi doloda. My real name is Kawisaha, which in my language means she's carrying ice.
Okay.
I know. I don't like to be cold.
Kawisaha?
Kawisaha, very good, yeah. But I come from the Oneida Nation of Southern Ontario, and I am an Indian day school survivor. I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and I just love being their mom and their aksut, and pretty much do everything I do is basically for them, and as many other youth as I can possibly help as well along the way.
You mentioned Indian Day School Survivor. Tell me about that experience.
The Indian day schools were schools that were implemented in the communities so that the children no longer had to leave the community to go to school, but they were still regulated, and they were still in the same format as the residential schools.
Okay.
So a lot of these atrocities, various different types of abuses occurred at these Indian day schools. And so we are now, as we are starting to learn and grow and heal, these different things are starting to come out, such as Indian day schools. When I was going to school, everything was just normal. That was, the way things were.
Right.
And we had to just basically put up with it. And when you're young and when you're small and you're seeing these types of things, knowing they're not right, who do you tell?
Yeah.
Who do you tell? Who do you go to?
You feel like you have no voice, I would imagine.
Exactly, yeah.
In my introduction, of course, I mentioned that you're the cultural coordinator at the First Peoples Innovation Center. Let's talk about this center, because there's a lot of exciting things that are happening.
Yes, and it's much happier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, excellent point.
Yeah. The center is located in Gatineau. It is the first Indigenous Fab Lab in North America. So we're really, really lucky and fortunate in that way. Now, a lot of people are like, what is a Fab Lab? It is much more than a fabulous laboratory. It is a fabrication laboratory is what it is.
Okay.
So in this place, we bring in Indigenous youth, Métis, First Nations, Inuit youth come through our center, and they are in a 5-month program which trains them in the digital arts. So they learn how to do 3D printing, they learn silk screening, laser cutting, CNC, which is a very intricate woodworking program,
right,
as well as embroidery and sewing, lots and lots of different cultural activities and teaching goes on there as well, which is where I come in. And so basically what we're doing as Indigenous people, we've always been innovative. We've always been innovative. If we weren't, we would not have survived.
Right. Yes.
In conditions such as Nunavut, for example, or in the desert in the south. We've always been able to survive with what we have. And we're not different.
Right.
Our
Yeah.
history has, changed things a little bit, but we're still innovative people. And we see that when we bring in all of the youth that come from all over. It was originally just in the local area, and then we started branching out into different communities in Quebec. And now we run a program where we take all of our machines and we go into communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to anything like that.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
been so successful. I mean, the success rates, it's amazing. The numbers are amazing.
It is amazing to see on paper what successes the Fab Lab has been able to create. It's impressive.
Yeah.
But to see it in person, to see it live and in action is amazing. And we're talking about young people who come from residential school survivors, Indian day school survivors. When you are raised in that type of environment, when you have a parent who's been raised by a nun or a priest and who had to go through those things, it's not always an easy upbringing. It's not always an easy life. And you learn very, very quickly that you're different.
Right.
That your experience is different than you, especially when you're young and you go to other people's houses and classmates and stuff like that, and you see how different their homes are compared to yours.
Right.
That's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to grasp and understand why a country would do that to a people.
Yeah, it's a thought that comes to mind all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's important to have conversations like this so that, because a lot of people put blinders on, right? I mean, you've probably dealt with that your entire life. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about how people can support the center, because I imagine, you need as much funding as possible.
Absolutely. We're always looking for funding. We do have a website that people can go to. It is cipp-fpic.com.
Okay.
And you can get a hold of one of our staff members there to inquire about donation if you want to donate. If you are a young digital artist or an Indigenous person who's looking to get involved in this program, because like I said, this program changes lives.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've seen young people with anxiety so bad that it's hard for them to leave the house. And in taking the program, they did a 180. They're completely different. And now this individual is teaching at this program. So
yeah, and we didn't have an opportunity to go through all the different workshops. You have workshops that are available to groups of all sizes.
That's
so
right.
Just a reminder to everybody at home to visit that website and find out more information on the other workshops. Thanks so much for joining us.
No
really
worries.
Appreciate it. All
Thank
right.
you so much.
We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to Daytime Ottawa. As you know, as we focus on Truth and Reconciliation Day here on the show, there's lots of events happening. In particular, we spoke to Trina a little bit earlier on this week at Madahòkì Farms about the fantastic events they have going on throughout the entire weekend. And we are joined by the head chef of Madahòkì Farms, Trudy Metcalfe Co. Trudy, welcome to the show. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and Trudy, I'd like to start off just, talking a little bit about yourself. I'd like to hear a little bit of your story. Give us a little bit about your background and how you got into the culinary arts.
Well, I'm originally from Nain, Nunatsiavut, which is northern coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, from a town called, Nain. And Nain is the last community on the northern coast. I grew up, left there when I was about 7 or 8 years old, grew up in northern Newfoundland, and then moved to Ottawa in my early 20s, just before I had my first daughter.
Okay.
But I've always cooked. I've always been cooking since I've been about 12 years old, cooking for family at home. I've never done any professional culinary schooling or anything, but it's just been a passion, and everybody's born with a gift. And I guess I've been one of them that's born with being able to handle a knife and put some things together.
Nice.
I started with Indigenous Experiences in 2018. They invited me to one of the powwows that used to be held over at Vincent Massey Park, and I was one of their invited chefs at the time, and I've been with them ever since and doing quite a few different festivals. We started out here about a year ago to this weekend, where we hosted our first fall festival.
Right.
And we've had 4 throughout the course of the time, and there's been huge growth, huge change, lots of experiences, lots of really good things happening out here. So it's really exciting to be a part of it.
Trudy, how would you describe Indigenous cuisine to people?
Well, the first thing to know is that there are 3 different groups of Indigenous peoples. So we have First Nations, we have Inuit, and we have Métis.
Right.
And we are all unique cultures. And with different cultures, there's different foods. So the foods that I would normally be cooking are country foods from the Arctic. But being the head chef at Madahòkì, we're all inclusive of all nations, all Indigenous groups. So I'm learning from some of the First Nations people how to cook some of their foods. And the nice thing is that there's a lot of leeway, I guess. There are so many different I don't want to say subcultures, but different groups of First Nations peoples, right. And they all have then their own unique foods. Right. So I am learning a lot, but excited to be learning it. And the thing is with food, we want it to be tasteful. We want to showcase it. We want to use as many whole foods from the lands. And if I was just cooking traditional Inuit country food, then most of our food we like to eat frozen raw or with very few ingredients because, in the Arctic, we didn't have access to all the fruits and vegetables right. and spices and that sort of thing that everybody in the South has. So there's been a lot of adaptation. There's been a lot of experimenting. And I don't think there's ever been an experiment that hasn't worked. So.
That's great to hear. Well, I know you're working extremely hard with your team over there because you have your reconciliation dinner that is coming up, yes. and you're really excited about that, as you should be. What's on the menu for the reconciliation dinner?
Well, to start, I'm going to be doing an Arctic char ceviche. So Arctic char from the Arctic. Ceviche is a tropical dish, but when I was in the tropics a few years ago, I had fresh red snapper ceviche, and I loved it.
Nice.
So I decided that I'm going to now make Arctic char ceviche. So it's one of my signature dishes. It's well liked. So that's just going to be a tasty bite to come when people are coming in. We are also doing, on the menu, it's called a traditional corn soup. I'm Inuk. My understanding is corn soup is a Mohawk dish. Okay. So it's not traditional, but it's going to be my version of a corn soup. I'm using all of their ingredients that would be in a traditional one, but I'm also adding to it. So that's going to be one of the dishes. Another dish is a Three Sisters salad. Three Sisters is a First Nation, so there's going to be corn, beans, and squash are the Three Sisters in First Nations culture. So we're making a Three Sisters salad again, adding to it, very open. There's lots of leeway. So I'm doing it with my own homemade salad dressing that I'm going to be making. The main course is elk medallions, and I'm making a barbecued butternut maple squash sauce to go with it. Oh my
goodness,
some
sounds amazing.
Potatoes. Yeah, oven roasted potatoes, wood-fired corn with a sage butter that I'm going to be making today. So all of this is new food to me. So
Right.
I know it's going to work out. I mean, I'm not concerned that things are not going. I know it's going to taste great. But I've been studying and trying to figure out, elk is a little scary because it's a really, really lean meat.
Right.
So it's going to be marinating and then slow and low cooking, braising it, and it's going to be good. I know it.
Trudy,
I know it well.
Throughout the entire year at the farm, I imagine you're always introducing food. So for people that come throughout the year, will they still have a food experience?
Yeah, so each season we try to do seasonal things, but there's also things that are available throughout, plus some of the things that can be made and preserved and sold out of the marketplace store that we have here. Then people can take home and finish them.
Nice.
We do have things that are prepared and ready to go. We have things that are, we do catering out of the farm, right? So
Right.
we always have things on the go. We are going to be adding more of my dishes to the online menu for catering. And, depending what people are looking for, and as we progress and as we grow our kitchen experience, and then we have these students that just went through our program, or they're almost finished the program, who are a big part of tomorrow night's survivors dinner.
Right.
So there's always going to, I don't think it's ever going to be stagnant. There's always going to be the standards, the basics, like
Of
our
course.
normal go time, but I think we'll be adding things as we come up with more ideas of what to make and what the demands are.
Trudy, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we brought up the website. Find out more information on there. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the show, and back, just a reminder, this is such a great edition of Daytime Ottawa because it's our Truth and Reconciliation Day. A great special to introduce you to different perspectives, and it's nice to get a young perspective here on the show. I am joined by Theland Kicknosway. Theland, welcome. Great to have you. This isn't the first time you've been here either, so it must be nice to come back here to Rogers TV and join us.
It definitely is. Thank you so much for having me.
A pleasure. Theland, I want to start off, let's go back to grade 3 for a moment, right? This is an opportunity for you to share some of your story, but take us back and share that story that happened in grade 3 and how you approached your school at the time.
Yeah, so back in grade 3, I was in the persuasive writing unit with my class.
Okay.
And in this unit, we were asked to write something to our principal or our teacher or anybody in the school. And so other kids were writing about getting balls during recess, or a class like fish for like a pet. I, on the other hand, wanted to do something to raise awareness about integrating my culture into our school. And so I asked for a powwow at our school. So I wrote the principal, and within a couple of days, I got an email back. And the only thing that it said in the email or on the paper was, "Let's do this."
Really?
Yeah. So
what was the inspiration? Like, what inspired you to approach the school?
Well, from a young age, I was always raised within my culture and in our traditions, and going to cultural gatherings and celebrations such as powwows was always a big part of my story of who I am.
Right.
And so my parents, we'd always travel all over Turtle Island to go to these powwows, and I realized that there wasn't a lot of Indigenous people that were at my school. There weren't many people that looked like me. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted to make sure that others were learning about who we were, because obviously we had the couple of days where we were focusing on Indigenous people in our unit, but then that was it, and there was nothing else after that for representation. So after that, I realized, well, I think this would be a great opportunity for kids to learn about who I am.
Did that continue? At the
definitely
school?
did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did,
for a couple of years up until when I entered high school. So for I think 6 years we had a powwow at our school.
Very cool. So I have had the benefit, and I can't share enough to people at home that, if you've never been to a powwow, it's such an incredible experience. But what does it mean to you personally?
To me, it's a gathering of our people. It's a gathering of our spirit. Powwows are medicine. They're very much healing to who we are. And so when you're dancing and you're singing with your friends and your family that you've made along your travels, it's really about community. That's what powwows are. And so for me, growing up, I've always been within this part of this circle, a part of this community. And being able to bring that to my school was definitely something very, very real, because then it was expanding that community for others to kind of see it and join. So
How do you commemorate Truth and Reconciliation Day?
Yeah, so the first step is always, wearing our orange shirts. That's always a part of seeing us, seeing who we are.
Right.
The next step is obviously the truth. Truth comes before reconciliation. So when we think about on our journey, we always have to look back and listen to the knowledge carriers, the knowledge keepers, our elders, but also to our youth and our children who are also guiding the next generation into truth and reconciliation.
Are you seeing more and more young people getting involved? I mean, even outside of your community?
I think there's definitely many great steps that are being taken all across this Turtle Island that we call Canada and the United States. Definitely a lot of people who are taking on those roles and those responsibilities of this next generation that's going to be the change makers.
I think what's great about having young people like yourself involved is that you know how to use things like social media to educate and engage with people, and you've been doing an incredible job of that. Instagram, TikTok. Just tell us, tell our viewers how you've been able to do that and what the response has been.
Yeah, so I started on TikTok just before the pandemic hit, just at the end of 2019, and I didn't really know what it was. It was just an app that my friends were using, and so.
Buddy, I still don't know what it is. I'm over 50. I have no idea what TikTok is. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, so I kind of realized that this was a place for sharing videos and for sharing different messages. A lot of videos that I was seeing was about humor and comedy, so I started out with that, but realized that's not really like what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I wanted to educate. I wanted to I wanted people to hear the good messages of who we are as Indigenous people. And so as time went along, I started sharing about who we are, about these things that I carry, which are our braids. And I actually shared a video in May of 2020, and that video of me talking about the significance and importance of braids, I think it's over 6 million views on TikTok right now.
So what is the significance? I mean, this is a great opportunity for you to share with our viewers here.
Totally. So when we were braiding our hair, for me, I always looked to my father, actually.
Okay.
He was one very important male role model in my life growing up. And, I'm really thankful for all that he's done to share these teachings along with the rest of my family. But, the significance of boys with braids and especially having braids, you're understanding when you're weaving together your hair strands, that you're giving thanks to your body, your mind, and your spirit. That's what the 3 strands are for. Okay. And so for me, I wear my hair to give thanks to the people before us, to my ancestors, and wear it proud and strong, so that the other children now can hopefully grow their hair out long and continue that to the next journey.
What you mentioned as well that you share messages about your culture. What other messages have you been sharing through social media and through your travels? I mean, you've been traveling all over as well.
That's right. Yeah. So now that it's getting a little bit easier to travel, we've been definitely going to powwows throughout the summer, and bringing back that community. On social media, I've been sharing a bit about some of the work that I've been doing since a young kid, which was running for missing and murdered Indigenous women. Mm-hmm. And I realized that this was definitely an epidemic that needed to be touched on, and there's some things that really needed to be shared. So for the last 7 to 8 years, we've been running and going on these different journeys to raise awareness and to raise money for missing and murdered.
Well, you're gonna stick around because you're gonna perform for us. So we'll come back after the break, continue this great conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Well, we are back as promised with Theland Kicknosway. Theland, thanks for sticking around. Really appreciate it. Now, you're going to perform for us, but before you do, I want to talk about your performance. And there's always a story, right, when you perform. What should we be looking for here?
This is definitely a very beautiful dance that comes from the Hopi people down in Arizona, and it's a storytelling dance. So for myself, from what I've been taught, is to leave it open to the audience to kind of see the different images that I'm creating. You know, look for the birds, look for the animals, look for, you know, the water, or look for the you know, just the sky beings that are being with us. You know, look for the different stars. I leave it open to the audience so that they can create their own story. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Well, you know what? Let me take this from you. I'm going to step aside here and let you perform, and then I'll come back in and we'll wrap things up, all right? Okay. That is just amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm out of breath watching you. Are you going to be able to talk after that?
I hope so.
Tell me, how long did it take you to perfect something like this?
So I first seen the dance at 4 years old.
Okay.
Started dancing when I was about 5.
Oh, I'm a bit. Oh, okay. Never mind. It was a technical issue on our side. They thought I turned the mic off. You're good to go.
So I've been dancing this style for close to 15 years now.
Okay.
And this style of dance has taken me all over the world. So
yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, you've been able to travel. I mean, you know, as a you're what, 19 years old now?
That's right. Yeah.
19 years old, and be able to do all that travel. What have you learned from your travels?
I've learned that, you know, stories as a part of our dancing is such an important aspect of carrying on the traditions of who we are.
I'll let you breathe in and out there just for a minute. You know, when I watch something like that, it really, you know, gives me an imagination of what we can all learn, right? And all of these things that you presented to us are from nature, and nature is really the backbone of everything that you do, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very important that, you know, as Indigenous people, we are always including the different elements that were here before us, right? The environment, you know, the earth, that's why we call it our mother, was always here before we were. So that's why in our designs, we always give thanks to, you know, the earth and all of creation that was here before us as humans were.
Theland, explain to me what the realities are for Indigenous youth in this country still.
Yeah, there's, it's always a thing that youth and children are the voices, right? Not just of tomorrow, but of today,
Right.
When we think of listening to our children, there's so many different unique things that they have to offer to this world because they are so close to creation, right? That's why we give thanks to our children. That's why we give thanks to our elders, because they're the ones that are closest to creation. That's in our traditions, right? So it's important that we listen to those voices, listen to those messages, right? And it doesn't matter what, is being shared. We have to understand that those voices are very important because those are the voices of our ancestors. And sometimes those voices weren't allowed to be shared.
Right.
Right?
You know what's interesting, as you're talking, one of the saddest things I think for children growing up, the first word that children learn is no, right? Because oftentimes we as parents, right, no, right? They go to do something and it's no. And that has always stuck with me. Somebody said that to me years ago and it really stuck with me. We should be saying more yeses, and I think that's exactly the message you're sharing with us here today.
That's right.
Theland, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us here on this special edition of Daytime.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the show. Big thanks to all of our guests coming on the show today. I really appreciate their time and their messaging. And you know what? If you really want to be a part of the change that we'd like to see happen, I really encourage you to go out to some of the events that are happening this weekend here in Ottawa. And Madahòkì Farm is probably the best place to go. They have the fantastic festival. We spoke to Trina earlier on in the week, but I just wanted to go over some of the great things that are going on. Again, it's located at 4420 West Hun Club Road. That's the old Lone Star Ranch. Just a great space. There's $5 on-site parking. It's pay what you can admission. They've got their Every Child Matters powwow, corn husk doll workshop, rawhide and corn rattle workshop. You can enjoy, of course, in traditional Indigenous foods, Indigenous makers and farmers market. That's open year-round, but of course it'll be open for the festival over the weekend as well. On Saturday and Sunday, you also have the Three Sisters storytelling show and powwow dance. The Spirit horse stories will be going on as well, and a Thanksgiving address. You can find out all the information at indigenous-experiences.ca. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.